You can hear
All
me well.
right, what's going on, Sync Academy members? I think we're coming through loud and clear now. We got our live stream on, and I'm going to just make sure that we are coming through. Looks like we are. Got a few of you guys already logged in and checking us out, which is cool. Thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. We're going to do another one of the live Q&A videos, what we like we did about 2 or 3 weeks ago. However, this time we're going to do it a little differently. I personally was just a little overwhelmed last time having to manage a live stream, making sure that these guys were able to get their, videos and audio to come through clearly. And then, of course, to go through the chat and monitor the chats, the questions. It was just too much for me. But at the end of it, even though it was just an hour, I was just drained and exhausted. I don't want to feel that way at the end of these things. So this time we're going to try it a little differently. We'll see how it works. This time we're going to start with the questions that you guys posted. I put a post probably 3 or 4 days ago asking if you guys had a question about sync licensing and you wanted us to answer it for this video to post it on the platform on that post that I put up there. So we're going to start with those questions. We have about 10 or 15 of those. If we have some time at the end, maybe I can go through the chat box and see if we have some extra time to maybe answer some of your guys's. But for sure, those of you that posted your questions, you're going to get sort of first come, first served here service here with this live Q&A. So with that being said, let me see. Are we all good on the live stream? Looks like we got some of you. You can hear us. All right, cool. You can see us. Great. Awesome, guys. So let's go ahead and get started here. First up is a question from Peter. Peter says, regarding tracks that take up space on our hard drives, I have a collection of tracks that are licensable, but off the label in terms of my genre. They are in all different styles and they can't be presented on one album, on one particular album. How would you recommend getting them into a library instead of just putting them in royalty-free outlets? I'm actually going to let you guys take a stab at that first if you want to. Either one of you guys have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll do it. So it depends on the number and it depends on the genres, right? Because you could put, if you have a good 5 to 10 that are somewhat of a packageable deal, like like if they're EDM or like hip hop or whatever they are, then yeah, then you do what I think Jesse and all of us have talked about all the time, which is package them together, make them an album, and then try to pitch them to libraries. If you already have a relationship with a library, then you probably can just kind of put one in a folder and be like, hey, do you need anything like this? That's kind of your second option of just kind of being like, well, stuff laying around. We have, you and I, library, have a relationship. Here's some stuff in case you're, interested, or maybe it sparks an idea. I know sometimes I'll get people that'll just send me tracks and I'll be like, that would be a good idea for a whole album of tracks just like that. So I would say those are probably your two options.
I agree. I would say there's really no shortcut to doing work. That's pretty much what we have to say here is that like if you have like 2 tracks that are in a particular style and you're okay at it, but it's something that's going to take you a lot longer to get to that 10 or 12 track limit or number, then there's no shortcut for that. You're just going to have to go make the time, make the dedication and try to get it. I would, of course, caution anybody just because you have, let's say, 50 tracks laying on a hard drive, they're in all different genres and different styles. Just because they're sitting there on a hard drive doesn't mean that you should necessarily be foregoing your primary purpose and your primary focus, which might be whatever that genre is for you. Or if you, especially if you're working with a library and they keep asking you, hey, just keep giving us new tracks, Peter. That's your primary focus. That should be where you really are putting a lot of your focus. So just, I know it bothers you and it bugs you to have 50 tracks that are sitting there and not really getting any play. However, it doesn't make a lot of sense to sort of push away from what's actually working for you, which is probably your primary genre and whatever library you're working with, to go work on some sort of a secondary project of trying to bring these back up to par or getting them into a library at some point. That would be one of those things like when you have a free day, if that, whatever that is, like I've heard of these things called free days, but if you get one of them, that might be something that you can do where you're like, hey, I got a free day today. Let me go ahead and create that 3rd track to kind of bring this one up. And that maybe can be like a year or 2 year long process for you. So you don't have to do all of that overnight. So I would just focus on what's important right now, which is probably your primary genre and your library. And then maybe start working on those things in the background. That would be something I would definitely recommend. I don't know, Mike, if you had anything else to add to that one.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that if you have a bunch that's in different genres, just try to package like what Trevor was saying. See if you have like a group that you can package, even if it's 5 or 6 or like an EP, even if it's not in demand with any of the libraries that you're working on. working with right now, at least kind of have them in the background. So it's kind of a combination of what they both were saying. So, of course, service what is needed now first, and then and then later on, if you have like some free time or whatever it is to finish up, you always first off make sure that those tracks are actually finished, and then from there, maybe you might only need like 2 or 3 more tracks, for each batch, let's say, to finish out albums. And another important thing too is with most genres, there isn't like really so much of a crazy urgency all the time. Like, when things are needed right away, that's kind of rare, when an album is kind of needed right away. So most genres in sync like can tend to stick around for a couple of years, even now. We've been getting placements from our library that's from tracks that were made like 4 years ago, 3 years ago. You know what I mean? So think about that too. If it's not an immediate need for a particular client or library right now, you could kind of put them in the back burner to get them finished at a later time, and it probably will still be okay and still be looked at as new by, whoever you send it to.
Excellent. Yeah, really good advice there. All right, next is up from Scott. What type of tracks get the most bang for your buck, so to speak? Looking at time spent creating, which seem to be most lucrative: vocals versus instrumentals, minimal versus a full orchestra, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say, Scott, the first thing, and for everybody watching, the genre and the type of track that you should spend the most time on is the one that you are the strongest at. That's really your focus. That's really where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Because I can tell you, and I want to have these guys chime in too, but I've had incredible royalties and huge placements for very simple tracks, like minimal, simple rock tracks. I've gotten some incredible stuff. I've also gotten paid fairly well for orchestral stuff, but same for vice versa. Like, I've had small placements and small royalties for orchestral. I've had small ones for rock. So I would say, in terms of most bang for your buck, you guys know that I've always talked about having probably mid to up tempo tracks is more than likely what you're going to see requested and placed in TV shows, movies, and commercials. There are obviously ballads and slower, dreamy songs, but if you watch TV and you watch these kind of shows, you'll find that there's not a lot of them. You'll see the vast majority of stuff that gets placed is more in that up tempo stuff. So whatever genre you're going in, I do think that that's one of those kind of golden rules to just strive towards, especially if you want this to be full-time income. If you want to just get a placement here and there, just stay true to what you love. Maybe it's slow, ballad, dreamy songs, and just put out an album of that, and you'll get a couple of placements, hopefully, right? But I know a lot of you guys are in Sync Academy because you want to do this full-time. You want full-time income. You want a lot of placements. So you kind of have to go where the odds are and where the energy is. And the energy in this industry is in those high tempo, mid to high tempo kinds of tracks. But definitely, I would say it's not going to be very wise to say, well, let's say, Scott, you were great at like EDM tracks, but you think orchestral is where all the money is. So you basically abandoned what you love and what you really are good at, and you kind of jump into a brand new thing just because you think that's where the money's at. I think it's a very foolish thing to do. I think you should really just focus on what your love is, what your passion is, what you're great at, and what you really can see yourself doing for years and years and years into the future. I don't think just chasing where the money is, where you perceive the money is actually wise. Because first of all, these guys can chime in too. I don't know if there's one sort of particular genre, or maybe I don't even know if they actually done studies on this. Maybe you guys know of like which genres get paid the most in terms of royalties and placements. I don't even know if they've done that study. That'd be really fascinating, actually. But I can tell you that I don't really necessarily see the industry that way. I see it more as, okay, what are my core strengths? What am I great at? What's my love, right? Where's my passion for music? And how does it meet the needs of the library that I'm working with? And basically their clients. That's really the needs who I'm meeting. So when you can find that, that's when you can kind of unleash, your productivity into this industry, and you can really do well. So, Trevor, I don't know if you have some more thoughts you want to give on that.
Yeah, every library has done a study on this, and it's called their royalty checks. And Jeff flew by. And what they do is they look at their royalty statements and go, what genres make us the most money in the area that we are, like through our sub-publishers or through our own contacts or whatever, and then they just make more of that because that's where the money is. So the best way to figure out what that study is to just look at a library and look at what genres they go back to. What genres do they have, like a volume 5 of hip hop beats, or what genres do they like to make? Like, most libraries still do all kinds of stuff, but every library, I think, from when I look at them, either they're a niche library where they're only one thing, they're only hip hop, or they're only, country, or they jump back to a thing that they know will make them money because of play. So what my recommendation for you would be is to take something that you love, because chasing the money is a horrible idea. It's like being like, well, doctors and lawyers make a lot of money. I don't really like being a doctor or a lawyer, but I'm just going to go do it because that's the most money. That's not a good idea, because you're going to hate it, and you're probably not going to even you're not going to try really hard. So in this, try and, within your bounds of what you like to do, find libraries that need what you like to do and make money with what you like to do, and then meet up them. So you meet up where your music should go, and so then you're kind of doing it yourself. You're going, okay, if you're a country guy, okay, I really like doing country. I can kind of do country rock too. So I've got these little bit of diversity in my work. And then I'm going to go to a client or a library or somebody who makes money with that genre, because there might be libraries that don't. So that I would probably be your best bet. So that way you kind of have your cake and eat it too. You get to make the music you want to make, and then be with somebody who's going to make money with that music for you.
That's it. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I would say that there's no formula to it doesn't work okay, well, the more time I put into a track, the more money it's going to make. And there's no sort of sweet spot in the sense of well, okay, how little amount of effort can I put into something to get the most return? That doesn't really work, in this way, for a number of reasons. So, one example is yeah, maybe you're good at doing minimal tracks, maybe you can do a minimal track in a few hours and stuff like that. But then when you deliver it to a library or a client or something like that, let's say they have 30 rounds of revisions for you per track, then, that's not quick anymore, right? That's a lot of effort. So might get you a lot of placements, but then your bang for your buck, let's say, might not have been as great. Likewise, if you're working with somebody that, that you vibe with, and you're giving them, a lot of high quality stuff that they need, that they can service their clients, and it's coming easy for you because it's what you love to do, and you love the relationship with that library or with that company. You could probably knock something out pretty quick and be like, oh, that was effortless and whatever. And one of those tracks that you did that was so effortless to you might land like $150,000 Super Bowl spot. And there's no formula to say that okay, you can't, even if you get that right, you can't necessarily say oh, I should do more of those so that I'll just be the Super Bowl guy. You know what I mean? Because everything changes. And then so really at the end of the day, it's more about your relationship with the people that you're working with, how much you trust them, how much they trust your music, and what that vibe is. And because they're the ones that have the finger on the pulse of what is needed right now, what their clients are need from them. And and they'll tell you hey, listen, we're getting a lot of hits with this. So and the better libraries will be able to tell oh, I see that you're really good at this. They may push you a little bit, in one way or another to try to get the most out of you, but they'll see oh, you're great at this. We need more of this. And, and this will work really well for you.
Absolutely, man. Really good advice there for sure. We got another question. This one's actually about SyncEdge. He's wondering, this is from Mark. He's wondering to know if both Trevor and Mike's libraries are listed in SyncEdge. They're not, Mark, because they actually work with me through the syndicate. So working through the syndicate, they're able to actually secure music through the opportunities that we have. Trevor's library is in the directory, though. I know we put that in there this last year. Mike, I think your library, you don't accept unsolicited submissions. Is that correct?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So if he changes that policy, he's more than welcome, and I'll want to include him in the next year's directory. But yeah, his library is a little bit different. They work their own way. They have their own policy for how they get music and that kind of thing. So for right now, they're getting their tracks through their own relationships and through the stuff that we do in the syndicate. So next up is from Frank. He had a question about coronavirus, about he just got a response from a library that he had contacted in January. So it was like a 5-month time span. He wants to know, how has it affected us? How has coronavirus affected us, especially Mike and Trevor, who own music libraries? And looking into the near future with new reports of escalating cases, what do you realistically see up ahead for sync licensing opportunities? More or less, or way less? The only thing I will say, Frank, is you left out way more. You're kind of leaning more towards the negative. More or less, or way less? Where's your way more? There could be way more stuff coming up. Who knows, right? Anyways, why don't you guys take that? Trevor, why don't you go ahead first? How has coronavirus affected your company as a music library?
Oh man, it's strange, because I know other libraries, kind of like what his message said, where they just kind of dropped off the face of the earth. And I don't know what those library situations are, what's going on there, but I've heard that too. But then I've also heard and have had more direct contact, including directly myself, with the concept that things are getting way better, or whatever we missed out. Way better, was that what his thing was?
Oh, way more, I think.
Way more better, or whatever. Way more better. And I think that that's true. I mean, just personally for my company, we've done more of everything. We've done more placements, more projects, done more things directly with music supervisors. We've done more of everything over the last 3-4 months than we ever have in our existence. And the future looks, now that everybody kind of understands, for the most part, COVID and how to deal with it, and and we kind of understand this, like, okay, we have to do something. Hollywood is opening back up, and movie, TV, all that stuff is all opening back up, and they're taking precautions and stuff. And I've been getting flooded with, okay, we're working on this new show next month, or we're doing this, or that thing is finally unpaused, so we're back to, collecting music again. So, and it's more than it was, because for one, a bunch of money just got frozen, and then now it's back up again. And two, everybody, like COVID isn't gone, so like life doesn't start over normal. Life is starting new. Zoom meetings, new streaming. Quibi is a new streaming service. Like, there's all this new stuff going on that wasn't around at the beginning of the year. All needing music, and now that we know, okay, the world isn't over, but we're still living in this, like, all of that just kind of drives eyeballs. And we talked about this in one of our other podcasts. It's driving eyeballs into your screens, which is where advertising dollars are, which is where there needs to be music, and so the cycle continues. So I'm saying, I'm more on the line, like, it's way more better, because there's the need for way more music.
Okay, cool, man. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, for me, so COVID kind of hit us pretty hard in the beginning. I think it hit advertising like really hard. So we were really busy right up until the beginning of the pandemic, and then everything just kind of dropped off for a good 2 months at least, maybe about 2 months. And I've seen that across the board with a bunch of trailer libraries, and not even just trailer libraries, but trailer houses and editors at these houses and stuff like that. I guess there were just random jobs here and there. I even saw some trailer houses starting to do, almost looking more like regular ad agencies, where they were starting to do COVID spots too, which is, that's not their thing, but everybody's got to work somehow. So for a time, it was a big drop off. But for us, so we looked at it, obviously, when you have these big changes, we looked at that as kind of an opportunity to kind of start to delve into different things that we wanted to do, and also look at other things that could bring in revenue during this time. So one of the things that we did was we got back into audio services and stuff, to be like, okay, well, advertising is kind of done, for at least for right now. We've heard the rumors of budgets being slashed and all that kind of stuff for the rest of the year, because nobody knows. So we started offering post-production services for that time, at the same time getting into games and talking to more of those clients. So I have definitely seen what Trevor said as far as other libraries and other music companies kind of falling off. So now, as of the past sort of 2.5, almost 3 weeks now or something like that, work it's like somebody threw up a light switch and everything is just back on in full, and actually even bigger now. So, and the funny thing is with us, since we put out all the feelers for engineering and all that kind of stuff, now is when those kinds of jobs are coming in. So we're getting stacked with that. Plus we're starting to fill, we've been knocking on doors to try to get in on searches with certain companies, including Netflix and stuff like that, who, maybe we were on, let's say, right outside the bubble. A couple of those other music companies have dropped off, and now we're in there. So we've been doing those searches, and now it looks like original music for advertising has come back, and also the legwork that we put in for games, we're now scoring games now too. So, everything's great right now, but I was actually just joking about this with Jesse. I kind of wish that there was a little bit of a ramp up, instead of just hey, we're all back to work, and here's a million things that you got to do by today. So, but whatever. I'm not gonna complain because as soon as I said that, I'm probably losing work, so I'm not going to say anything and jinx it. So
Yeah, we were just joking around because it's so funny that like it's this time where we're gonna look back on coronavirus and go like, remember those couple of weeks where everything was a little bit relaxed and mellow, we had some time to ourselves and our family. Even though we were all freaked out and scared, we're actually gonna nostalgically look back on that as a nice, cool little relaxing time for all of us. So, but yeah, we're kind of coming out of that now, of course. For myself personally, I actually got more busy when coronavirus started up. I got way more requests from the library I was really primarily partnering with. I felt really actually overwhelmed in a way because I had a lot of stuff going on. And it eventually got me to kind of reprioritize my entire life, actually. So sync licensing, if you guys didn't catch it a couple weeks ago, I'm no longer putting my own music out there into this business anymore. I'm still doing, obviously, Sync Academy here. I'm still doing Sync Edge, still doing the Syndicate. I'm still providing all the coaching and mentorship services. But myself personally, I have other priorities in my life that I really want to focus on. And putting out my own music seems to be getting in the way of that. And so I'm just kind of in a little bit of a transitional period moving forward. So for me, it completely changed the trajectory of my career, actually, and for the better. I'm not sad about that. I'm not angry about that. I accept it for what it was. And it really allowed me, I think this downtime for sure allowed me to do a lot of introspection. Where it goes forward, I mean, you just heard yourself that, Trevor and Mike, they are getting busy, and they're getting probably even more busy than they were before. Everybody's kind of playing catch up. There's a lot of stuff going on. So don't leave out that way more option. That was the one thing that was left out of that question. How you see and perceive your future it matters. It makes a difference. So don't only just think, well, there could be a little more, there could be less, or a lot less. That's kind of like in a scarcity mindset. You're thinking there's not enough to go around for everybody. Instead, also keep the balance there, that there could be also way more work than you could ever keep up with. And I actually think that's probably what a lot of people are feeling right now. Believe it or not, that's the truth. All right, next.
Like to add just a tiny little bit to that, as far as like there being way more out there. So the thing is, like, you can kind of look around, and there's just like what Trevor was saying about like Quibi and like more YouTube content being out there and all that kind of stuff, and Twitch and esports and all that kind of stuff. So there's all these other opportunities that just kind of opened up since when the traditional ones have kind of fallen off. So like in a sense, there's a lot more opportunity now than there ever has been,
and it's going to grow more and more.
Yeah, it does feel that way.
Yep, and it's going to just grow more and more and more as time goes on, as more of these outlets are available to us. So yeah, we got to keep our eyes out for them. All right, next up is from Aaron. Aaron, what are your experiences transitioning into the audio world full time? Did you come from another career path? What were some of the hurdles when transitioning, and how did you overcome them? What percentage of your overall income before COVID-19 is from sync licensing versus other musical or non-musical endeavors? How do you think the pandemic has changed the sync licensing world? Well, we covered your last question already, Aaron. I can tell you myself, I'm not going to rehash all the details. I did release a video on my YouTube channel called My Journey into Sync Licensing. It's a 30-minute video. My entire story is there, Aaron. I'm guessing you probably haven't maybe watched that one, or maybe you're more curious about these two guys, about how they got into sync licensing. We can maybe do a quick little summary of how they did that. I can say in terms of percentage of the overall income, before I started Sync My Music, before I started this whole business, it was probably 90% of my income. It was pretty much all of it. Once in a while, I would do a video gig here and there. I would mix people's music once in a while. I do something, odd jobs here and there, but not much, honestly. Most of my work was just primarily on sync licensing. Now, as this has grown, Sync My Music has grown, that percentage has gotten smaller and smaller over the years. But before I was doing this, yeah, it was pretty much my bread and butter. Most of my royalty checks were really what paid my bills. I would get some consideration fees, once in a while a sync fee that was okay, but it was like, that sort of anxiety waiting for that royalty check. Am I going to pay my bills with a lot of, space left over, or am I going to barely pay them? A lot of that kind of was going on, but it was my primary source of income for many, many years in this industry. So, Mike, I don't know if you want to start off with that one, like your journey into this. I know you got into it even way before I did. What were you doing before you got into sync licensing?
Yeah, I was sleeping on a lot of studio floors and and trying to be an artist and everything too. No, so actually, yeah, two things kind of happened when I went to school in New York. I was literally a studio rat. I was just into everything like with recording. So I had this whole thing of trying to be like wanting to be a game and film composer like since I was really young. somebody had told me, and this is the short version because this story is really, really long. But like the short version is somebody had told me that like a way that you can get into that is by doing TV or starting with commercials. Obviously in New York, it's very commercial based. So so I just kind of like found out who the commercial houses were, said I'd do whatever, intern, pour coffee. I was parking like an engineer's car, like, and he had this huge freaking Escalade or whatever the Escalade was back then in the middle of Manhattan. Try to find parking for that thing, right? So that was my job for a while. So it was that, sleeping on studio floors, and just like kind of learning about that while also being a drum and bass artist. I was putting out records, and actually the transition into music for TV and film and stuff like that happened through actually kind of my artistry. So I just kind of got lucky in the sense that there was a company I was starting that was putting together its roster of composers, but they wanted it to be actual independent and underground artists. So I was part of a group that filled that need of, like, at the time it was drum and bass, but it was really drum and bass and EDM and all that kind of stuff. So we were like kind of the dance music crew. From there, I would say that, so there's a little bit of a difference because most of my journey has been in custom scoring, especially for commercials. So in the beginning, it was mostly buyouts and stuff like that. So technically, it's part of like the sync licensing world, but it wasn't really licensing. So just as a distinction, like I would say probably like 95% of my income at that time, probably up until about 2012, was from that. Then when the recession of 2009 really swept through and hit, and that started to bring up my like sort of licensing and royalties sort of income up. So it became like about maybe 70-30. Had a job for a little bit when I moved to LA, which took up probably about 40% of my income while still making 60% of my, and then nowadays it's kind of flipped. So most I'd say maybe I don't know. It's weird because I would say like maybe 60 to 65% of my work comes from licensing, but a really good chunk comes from custom scoring because they just pay more. But so.
Right, but it's all in the world of sync licensing. So yeah,
it's all in the world of sync. So yeah, basically 100% of my income for the longest time, except for like maybe like a 3-year period where I had a job in post production here in LA, like in the around 2014 or something, or around 2013, 14, something like that. Yeah, about almost 100% of like my income has come from music to picture.
Yeah, and I think before I want to ask you, Trevor, too. I think kind of the core of this question is it possible? I think that's what I'm hearing through this. Like, could you actually do this, or is this just like a little bit of here and there? It is hard, and it is a lot of work, and it's a lot of persistence and hanging in there, but it is possible. It absolutely is possible. So I want to make sure you guys are aware of that. You probably don't know many people other than maybe the 3 of us that have been doing it full time. That's why, because it's really hard. It takes a long time, and you have to keep showing up for something that's not always easy to do. So that's why you don't meet a lot of people that do this. But anyways, Trevor, how about your story on that?
Yeah, so mine was essentially I was just a dude making hip hop beats, trying to get them to rappers, kind of thing, working at Blockbuster, that dinosaur corporation, and I transitioned out of that where it was like, okay, I was part time anyway, so I had extra time to make tracks and work and try and get better at my music and stuff, and then I got into the sync licensing, and then this is kind of where I made a mistake, didn't make a mistake. It's kind of like I wish I would have done it a little bit differently, is I jumped on to work for a library as an engineer. And that ended up becoming my thing for like 10 years, is where all I did was, not all like completely, but most of what I did was just mix other people's music that went into libraries. And so I spent so much time just like 2, 3, 4 tracks a day, just mixing all the time, to the point where at the end of the day, I was like, I don't even want to hear the word music anymore. I want to go like step away and listen to nature or something, And so I spent a lot of time doing that, which if you think of that in the sense of any other career, like let's say you're a nurse or you're, whatever it is that you're doing, what I should have been doing was not dive into a full-time kind of thing, and something more that I could pull back on, where I'm going, okay, it's full-time now, or it's almost full-time now, but I still have that chunk out where I'm doing music, so that I could wean off of the thing I don't completely want to do, and wean on, is that a thing? Wean on to the thing that I do want to do, which is making the music to then be in the libraries to make royalties. Because and it was a little a little bit even soul crushing for me too, because I was sitting there mixing all of this music that I know other people had made, and they had a bunch of fun making it, and they're going to be making royalties once I send the mixed deliverables to the library, and then I'm stuck in the middle. Like, yes, I was getting paid and it was paying the bills. I'm not like complaining in that sense, but it wasn't like I wasn't allowing myself to end up where I really wanted to go originally. And so I just got kind of stuck in the like, well, sometimes I'll make beats and if I feel like it, but for the most part, I'm just a mix engineer. And you could do that. It doesn't have to be a mix engineer. You could be a nurse. You could be a nurse or a, whatever your job is, secretary or whatever your job is, where you're just like, well, I'm really overdoing it at work, so I'm just never going to get to music. And that I think is something that slowed down my trajectory a lot. It slows down a lot of people's trajectory. And so somehow figuring out how to slowly empty the one cup by filling the other cup, so that eventually, your new cup, which is the making music, is fuller. So if it's, pulling back, and I know it's not as easy because like jobs don't, you can't go to your boss and be like, I need 80% less hours now, or I'm sorry, 10% less hours now. I hope you're cool with that. But you got to figure something out and start to wean off of the one to get to the other. It's really, I mean, I know some people who would just save up and then quit, where they're just like, okay, I'm gonna just go grind. But it's a hard mentality to get into, to not do anything, to really save up, to grind at your current job and then just quit and then be like, okay, now I have like 5-6 months to just go hard. It's that mentality. For one, it's hard to stay going hard for longer than a month because people burn out and stuff. But if you can do it, that's a possibility. I've heard people do that too. So there's just, whatever your way of transitioning, you just gotta, understand yourself well enough to be able to transition from job to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think for anybody that wants to make this their full-time gig, you have to take failure off the table. It can't be something you can even like flirt with. So I don't like, again, but I want to make sure you guys do not just quit your job and go, well, I have to succeed at sync licensing or else me and my family starve to death. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. But I mean, figure out a way in your life to make sure that you succeed and that you don't have this like, well, I'll give it a good shot, but if it doesn't work out, at least I tried. With that mentality right there, you're already giving yourself an out, and you're already giving yourself a reason to maybe give up and burn out in the future. So whatever that might be, however you can possibly do that for yourself, like that's who really makes it. It's basically, you have to be desperate pretty much to make it. You have to be like, like Mike sleeping on the floor, like Trevor, that's just like, constantly wanting to do more and more and more, and then being kind of like, limited by the amount of free time that he had, but just knowing that he needs to do different things, So you have to have this sort of like, I need to do this. Like there's nothing, this is all I got. It's almost like that's what I notice from a lot of people that succeed. It's like, well, this is all I have. I don't have anything else I can do. There's nothing else I want to do. This is my gift. This is my passion. This is my knowledge base. This is my experience, right? So you have to kind of like lean into that and get comfortable with that. I really do think that's the way to go about this for sure. Next up, Z-Man. When working with a library, and I'll take this one, it's a pretty quick one. When working with a library and you'd like to do custom jobs, do you let them know or will they spontaneously offer it to you as your relationship grows? Both, Z-Man. First, you should definitely let them know. Right when you get accepted by them, or if you've already been accepted and you haven't let them know, send them an email today if you want, and let them know. I don't know if you guys do custom jobs, if you guys get work that needs custom music, but please include me on those conversations. I would love to contribute. I'd love to submit. I am reliable. I'll get you guys music on time in a format that you need. Again, here's my genre specialties. Maybe you can remind them what you really do well. And yes, put that in front of their face so that they at least have that in their mind. Also, you'll find that most libraries, as long as you're regularly submitting music to them and they're like, you didn't send them one library and then you're gone for 6 months. But if you're in contact with them and you're putting new music into their catalog, you're probably going to be looped into a lot of those conversations just because you're one of the people. You're one of the composers, you're one of the inner circle members. So it's going to happen both ways, but definitely don't wait for people. Don't be passive and just go, well, I'll just wait till they ask me to do custom music. No, put it out in front of them and say, I will do your custom music jobs if you'd like me to. And I'd love to be a part of that, right? I'd love to help, essentially. Remember, service mindset. You're not about like, I'd like to get those custom fees. I'd like to get that stuff, but I would like to help you guys serve your clients. Can I be a member to help you guys serve and make those gigs go well for you guys? If you come with that attitude, more than likely you're going to get included on those things.
Just real quick to add
Oh
to
yeah, go
that.
ahead.
Yeah, so the other thing I would say too is, and this really works the best if you're already working with a library and you have a relationship, and then you want to ask them. So one thing that you can show them too is if you've done any kind of custom scoring before, to video or anything like that, give them a link to that video to say like, hey, I've done custom work before. I've scored the picture before. This is a little example of it. It's not, the reason why is it shows a company more than just how talented you are musically to picture. It shows like how well you work, because everybody knows that like when creating the picture, there's a whole process involved of revisions, taking direction, all that kind of stuff. And to say that and to show like a finished sort of project that you've done where you've gotten through all of that, maybe it's not even the type of music that you're even supplying your library, but that can show a library be like, oh, okay, cool, so what the process is like. You've gotten through this, you have a success here, so that tells us that you know how to work with this. So it kind of relieves a risk on their end a little bit to kind of throw you a sort of custom scoring job, because they kind of have an idea. It's like, okay, well, you're not going to just like, if it gets too hard for you, you're not just going to flake out on us. And, so.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're somebody who doesn't have those credits yet, you don't have any custom gigs you've done before or anything like that, then just do a fake one. Just go get a video, a commercial or something, and just do a fake one as like an example or like a demo.
Yep.
I've seen plenty of people do that. I've even seen people do cool, like where they'll take their music and hire some dude off of Fiverr to like edit it in cooler ways and stuff, and then they have this cool package that they share with people, and they've actually never landed a real gig yet, but they have something cool to show people.
To show what they can do. Absolutely. Yep. And Mike's absolutely right that showcases a little extra ability to be able to do that. Now, of course, if it's a fake one, you didn't necessarily take direction. You kind of probably did an original kind of a thing, but still showing that you had the skills to be able to, put your music into the visual and have it match the visual and hit those certain, cues and those points and that kind of thing, for sure. Very, very important. Next up from Kaz, I'll probably throw this one to you guys, maybe Trevor first. What is the best way to stay updated on the trends in hip-hop library music? For example, it seems like using ear candy, like risers, impacts, vocal shots aren't as popular as they used to be, or maybe that's just my observation. How long does it take for certain sounds to become outdated? So I think Trevor and Mike, you guys both do hip-hop way more than I do. Trevor, if you could start with that, where do you see on terms of how do you keep up on trends and what's going on, especially with your library that does hip-hop yourself?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. The risers and stuff, that definitely has like kind of pulled out a little bit in the hip-hop. It definitely feels, those things feel a little extra with the current state of hip hop. Like hip hop definitely likes their dropouts and their small drum fills into things, like not necessarily like big buildups or a riser or a reverse crash explosion thing or whatever, which wasn't true a while ago or whatever. So that's perceptive of you. Current trends, like it really is just this listening to music. Like modern music, like listen to Drake. I don't think Drake has had like a riser in any of his music lately, if ever. And whoever else is new, like they're not really doing that. They're doing cool cut downs or a DJ scratch slowdown, or they'll do a drop with a big reverb, or it'll be like the snare will hit, it'll be like pop, and then it'll be silent, and then it'll go into a thing, which is a cool edit point. And that kind of stuff, like that's what's going on in the, that's what the kids are doing these days. And you kind of got to do it right. And if, just going off of, because I know TV is different than the record world, where TV definitely has a little bit different things going on because of the audience. Go to the big library, the big hip hop libraries, or all libraries that have hip hop, and see I would even say like the bespoke libraries that are just hip hop that are on the big library companies. Listen to their new releases, listen to what they asked for, because their new releases are just a bunch of things that they asked for from their producers. So if there's no risers and uppers and all that stuff, and it's all other types of transitions, they probably asked for it that way. So it sounds like you kind of already do it, so you're kind of already there. But for anybody listening, just listen to what's brand new, and then you'll know what's going on.
Absolutely. Mike, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so and this is kind of how we go about it too when we're formulating sort of new creative directions and stuff like that. But some things that we see is like, just kind of, and this is very true when working with a lot of advertising, but listen to, some of the newest like sort of hottest records that are coming out, some like even in the sense of like listening to new like sort of like Diplo tracks and stuff like that, right? And seeing, where it's kind of hip hop, kind of EDM, kind of like different things, seeing what's kind of thrown in there. So like what we've been seeing lately is like, there's a trend in hip hop right now where like breakbeats are coming back, and not everything is completely just drum machine like sort of programmed anymore. You're starting to see breakbeats again. You're starting to see sort of like an old school mentality coming back into hip hop again, and this is kind of being reflected in some of the briefs that we're seeing from clients too, who are looking for now like throwback 90s hip hop, even to like 90s 2000s hip hop or whatever, like whatever people were calling the heyday of hip hop, who knows. But like but there's definitely like a different sound in that's being kind of requested. But it's hard to try to I guess like what's coming next. That's usually the job of the library or the company that you're working with, but you can kind of see it in the sense of like what you're hearing as far as new records coming out. A new record comes out and be like, oh wow, this is crazy, it's a huge record, and it's like sample based hip hop again. Like, I mean, so some, like for instance, Run the Jewels, like their new album came out, and of course like their song Legend Has It, that was on the Black Panther soundtrack, and then of course you had that sprung this whole thing of syncs for that type of hip hop. Plus DJ Shadow had a ton of syncs, and there's a lot of requests being like, hey, we love this DJ Shadow track, we want music like this, and that's all pretty much like sample based sounding hip hop. Now obviously you don't want to sample anything, but like as far as the style of hip hop, it's like sample based hip hop, breakbeat hip hop. Like, it's not much in the way of like 808 drum machines, and not like the trap style of hip hop that's been happening over the past couple of years too. So though, if you look at those kinds of releases, like I said, Run the Jewels just came out with their they released their album early actually this summer, and yeah, so that could be a good thing to like look at. It's like, oh, this is a hot record, what's going on in the production here, and that can kind of give you a little bit of a a little bit of like a roadmap as to like, okay, I think this might be what might be asked for in the next whatever couple of years or something like that, or the next year or so.
Yep.
Yeah, and if I might chime in a little bit
Yep.
too, on the second part of his question, which was the like, how do we know to like stay away from things that may sound dated? You're kind of like nostalgia brain, memory part of your brain will tell you that when you listen to things, and a perfect example is if you hear certain synths that remind you of the 80s, that's because the 80s had that sound, right? And so you hear things that remind you of the 70s or the 90s or the 2000s. Like a perfect example is Little John, and all the producers around the early 2000s were doing the synth heavy like Little John stuff. And if you try to do that now, anybody who's listening is going to instantly dial the clock back 10, 15 years and remember it with 20 years now. Oh my goodness.
20 years. Dude, we're old, man.
And they're going to dial back that clock and go, oh, that sounds like Little John. I don't need that right now. And that's same with, if you've got some rock tracks, but it just sounds like, 80s indie rock or hair metal or something. You're just poking at that part of the brain that's telling them this sounds old. And so paying attention to what the trends are and what your mind reminds you of, or what the sounds remind you of, or remind other people of, is a good indicator of how to know if a track is dated or not.
Totally. I just gave a feedback on a track today in the Syndicate for a member who had a track that I told him, like, this kind of sounds like that early 2000s sort of in the club, Lil Jon sort of a vibe. And I would say for those producers that you find you're running up against that, where you're kind of like, well, and we're all guilty of this. Like, I still want to make metal music like the stuff that I listened to when I was 16 years old. It's just like, whenever you were really first in love with music, it tends to be your where your heart is at. So we're all kind of like, we can all fall into this. What you should be doing if you want to make sure that you're staying current is listen to new music a lot. Like, you should be having, once in a while, go listen to your oldies, favorites, that kind of thing for sure. But you really should listen to what's on the Billboard. If you still have a radio, whatever those things are, turn on like a popular, your local hip hop station, local pop station, or just go online and look at what's trending, where the top, Billboard 50, that kind of thing in whatever genre. and download those songs, get them on your Spotify app, whatever it is, and put them on when you're going to the gym, when you're doing errands in your car. You need to just surround yourself with modern music so that you just become, that stuff becomes kind of like subconscious to you. So the choices you make in your music start to kind of echo and mirror what you're hearing on these tracks. Because if you're only listening to Little John, guess what your hip hop's going to sound like? You're going to just always go back to that, right? Or if you're not listening to any new music, but the music you did listen to was Little John, the fit 20 years ago, it's just going to always kind of have that throwback feel. So definitely listen to a lot of new music and get inspired by it and fall in love with it. It's like the first thing I would say before you make any music. Spend like at least a week just nothing but listening and finding like what are the rules of this genre, what are the sort of things that are happening in the sort of newest instance of it. There's always kind of new rules that are being broken and new ways that things are put together, new transitions, new lyrics, new whatever, right? And all the artists are kind of copying each other and kind of being inspired by each other. So you can kind of see a lot of these like threads that get woven in between all of it. But yeah, definitely use your ears first, really listen. Next up, Ernie. I can take this one. It's just a little bit of a misunderstanding, I think. Is there any demand for songs that are longer than the 60, 30, 15-second tracks demonstrated in tutorial videos, such as a 4-minute track like might be heard on the radio? So Ernie, I think the miscommunication here, or the misunderstanding, is we're not producing 60-second, 30-second, 15-second tracks. What you're talking about there are what we call the alt mixes. These are the alt versions. These are cut down versions of our full track, okay? The full track, I recommend you guys shoot for 2 to 3 minutes. Some libraries are cool if you have it less than 2 minutes. Some are actually cool if you have it over 3 minutes. But for the vast majority of libraries and opportunities out there, when you're just putting together music for like an album, like production music for a library, 2 to 3 minutes is fairly safe, because even if they say, hey, we only want it to be 1:30 max, it's pretty easy to cut out a part of your track. Editing and cutting out things is a lot easier than having to add new parts of your music to get it into that sort of like 2 to 3 minute long section. So those cut downs you're referring to are basically versions of the 2 to 3 minute long track, right? So we're going to take 60 seconds of it. That's going to be one alt mix, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, maybe even a sting. But those are just versions of it. So I hope we cleared up that miscommunication or that confusion there with you. Next up is from Brian. And I'll give this one to Mike. You can take this one. My primary interest is writing music for games. Think symphonic, but not trailers. Are there libraries that focus on game music, or do those tend to be less common? So Mike's kind of our resident, sync licensing pro on video game music and producing. So what can you share for that one?
Yeah, so right now there isn't a whole lot of, so I don't want to say that. So every library, especially right now, is trying to get more into the game space. Libraries, the big libraries have in the past and still do, like with AAA titles, that license, I guess. So I actually just did, I think, a tutorial about this. But so I think AAA titles or AAA game studios, when they license music, their first reach is going to be towards label and artist music. And then they'll look to libraries, and usually the bigger libraries, for, to kind of fill in the gaps that the composer or the label music didn't get. And it's very similar to how it works with films, on that scale. And when it comes to the indie world, indie games tend to go towards royalty-free libraries right now, and because price points are a lot lower. And with a lot of indie developers, it's like, you're looking at kind of more hobbyists and stuff like that, and people who are, just kind of in the same way that an indie filmmaker goes about making their films. So thing about games, though, is there's no royalty structure. It's everything in games is royalty free right now. Now that might be changing, and because as more games get to streaming and you have esports and all that kind of stuff, and I know there's a lot of talks about trying to get some sort of royalty structure for streams, but as far as revenue shares for sales, like that's already done. And you're not gonna, no one's gonna get any money off of sales for games, except maybe for indie games, but like you're talking, minimal amounts. So usually when it comes to libraries, you don't really see libraries that are just like, okay, we're a game focused library. Not yet, at least, so you do have the libraries that do supply to games, because they are hot, like, entertainment sort of, big in entertainment as well. And everyone's trying to find a way in there, but like because of the way it works, because it's not like, so TV is different, right? A library can be like, hey, just how about we give you 100 tracks, and work out some sort of like reasonable price for them, and then rely on royalties to pay everybody. That doesn't happen in games, so there has to be a budget, for all the music, which there usually is, so but yeah, because the biggest games are able to afford like the biggest music, that's what they go after first, and then use the libraries to kind of like fill in the gaps. And then as far as the smaller games and real indie titles, they'll go after like the royalty free sort of libraries first, and almost like micro licensing deals, first, and then go after like whatever else after that. So
Yeah, go ahead, Trevor.
I was going to ask Mike a question, actually. We'd be an audience member for a second.
You get to absolutely.
I just learned a little bit about some trends in like indie games and stuff like that. And something that's really popular is soundtracks. So an example is there was this game Undertale that came out like 2 years ago, and the soundtrack blew up. People love the soundtrack. I mean, people love the game too, but the soundtrack really blew up. And then the streams just like crazy on Spotify and stuff like that. People listen to it all the time. That seems to be a good, like a potential like good avenue for royalties in a sense off of placements in video games. So my question is how often does a composer or the people making the music get to participate in that? Because especially in indie games, there are chances for these kind of like not niche, but like kind of break off like successes where it's not like a big hit in the grand scheme of things like a Halo or something, but somewhat where you get a few 10, 20,000 people streaming your soundtrack to this video game. Is that it is in most situations the company that owns the game gets all that, or are there scenarios where maybe you participate in that as a composer?
Yeah, so when it comes to so that's the thing. When it comes to indie titles, especially as the music provider, the soundtrack is kind of, that's your gold, right? So you try to just like, obviously, if an indie developer has the money to buy out the music and put you on a work for hire, then it's their music. So you can negotiate like rights as far as the soundtrack sales and stuff like that, but chances are, since they bought you out, then they're going to be the ones to decide whether they're going to put that soundtrack out and make the money off of it, and how much of that they want to cut to you. Now, work for hire deal, right? So indie developers are not going to have that kind of money to do that. So, and because they don't have that kind of money to buy out music, and also because they don't have the infrastructure to sell an album. Remember, you're the music company, so you have more of an idea how to actually sell like a soundtrack. They're probably not going to be most likely they're not going to be concerned with that. And so it's easy for you to say like, okay, well, I'll provide you with the music for your game, but I want to keep the sales for soundtracks, and you can even work with them in the sense of like, I'll put it out on my, basically what you're saying is, if I put it out on my Bandcamp, put it out globally on Spotify and everything, we can time this so that this can work as a great promotional tool for your game. And they're usually really good with that. And then they can come back and say like, so for instance, on Steam, on a store like Steam, the developer can set up DLC. And you can add the soundtrack as part of the DLC. And from there, in your contract, you can say like, okay, if you guys agree, like you'll put my soundtrack out as part of the DLC, we know that that's promotion, so I get 100% of the revenue that comes off of that soundtrack sale, which is sold separately from the main game. So yes, that is a way to get royalties, so to speak, and there are different ways and to kind of do that. So when it comes to, on the flip side, when it comes to the major tentpole games, like with the AAA companies, you're not going to get that because they're just going to throw you on a work for hire, pay you a shitload of money, and it's their music. So, but it makes sense though, if you think about it, like Sony, right? Sony is not just Sony Interactive. It's, they have Sony Music, they have, everything else like that. So they're going to want to keep the rights to the music as much as possible and acquire them so that they can go and exploit it. Now they'll probably cut you in on, royalties for each other exploitation, but they'll never cut you in on the sales of the game itself. So if that makes sense.
Thanks, man. Definitely, yeah, a lot of stuff to think about there. That's been my experience too. Is that the libraries I've worked with once in a while will throw me something about a video game opportunity, but it has not been anybody I've worked with that's been like always throwing those things to me. I do see that probably changing. I think as you guys do too, as video games become more and more common for everybody, that there'll probably be libraries. They probably, I don't know, there might be some companies that just start up as a video game production music company, and they're just like, that's what we do. We just supply music to video games. That'll probably happen. But also what will happen is you'll have libraries that have traditionally been focusing on TV or film or trailers, and they might move and transition and just start to focus a little bit more on these other new avenues that they can earn income. And over time, that becomes more their focus. And oh yeah, by the way, we also do some TV. We also do some whatever, right? So it could be just sort of like transitioning the focus for sure. All right, this is kind of a funny one. I don't know. It's a weird question, but like there's something interesting about it. If all three of you were in a sinking hot air balloon that needed 3 hot killer tracks in 60 minutes to avoid hitting the mountains, and the choices were, first of all, where do you come up with these scenarios, man? And how do we have our computers up in the clouds? I guess we all have our little studios up there. So let's just go with all that. Number 1, swing metal. Number 2, hip hop ballet. Number 3, sacred EDM with vocal. Who would be assigned to what, and could you deliver the deliverables? The other option, this is the best part, the other option would be one of you thrown out of the balloon, okay? So how that all comes together.
Are we confident enough as a trio
to make
those 3 things?
Well, the first thing,
or do we 2 of us just boot one of the others and don't even risk it? Is that essential?
There's so much, there's so much like sociology and psychology in this. There's too much. But I do want to say those three genres, swing metal, hip hop ballet, and sacred EDM with vocal. Now I don't even know what sacred means, but I love it.
I don't know.
I actually want to hear all 3 of those. I want to know what swing metal sounds like. Hip hop ballet, I definitely want to hear that. And sacred EDM, I kind of picture like monks chanting to an EDM beat, and I just to me it's like yes to all 3. I'd love to hear all of them, but it's a ridiculous question, of course, but I do think that the one thing I think that could be useful out of this is just this idea of pushing the boundaries of the genres that you think are already pushed, because I tend to sometimes do this too, where I think like everything's been done, there's kind of like what other sounds are there, and a lot of times we kind of get stuck in that with sync licensing, because we are always sort of being told what to do in a way, right? They're always asking us, we need this kind of music for this kind of a project. And so we're kind of following, in the footsteps of another producer and another sound. And of course, when I tell you guys use a reference track, I'm telling you literally follow in the footsteps of somebody else, literally use their music and inspire yourself with it. But I think this is kind of one of the, once in a while, maybe once a month, you should do stuff like this. You should really just push the boundary of what you think is possible, kind of go a little outside. Let's say you are a metal producer. Try to create a track that has kind of a swing, laid back, interesting feel to it, and see what happens. You might learn something in that kind of a process. And I think it's also important to kind of reinvigorate, even if you never use that track for anything licensing related, it's really important to like reinvigorate yourself with your love of music, and also realizing that it's not something that can be mastered. There is no such thing as mastering music. You are just constant. It's like a puzzle that just, as soon as you fix it, it just reshuffles itself, and you have to go, oh crap, okay, there's a whole new way to do this now, and which is so intriguing and enticing about it, and what keeps me coming back to it over and over throughout all my life, right? So I think it's really good though to be thinking this way and kind of pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable in all these. But anyways, thanks for the question. That was from Pinda.
I was gonna say, I think that I kind of see this as like kind of like it's like the balloon or whatever is like those. It's like that weird creative brief that you get every now and then that's just like kind of doesn't make sense, and it's like you look at it and like it's like, wait, you want what? And you try to figure it out kind of thing. So I think in this scenario I'm probably going to be the one that's going to be thrown out, because I know immediately like I'm going to spend probably 55 of those 60 minutes on the phone with the balloon manufacturing company and saying, okay, listen man, I want my money back, and also if you want this track, I'm going to have to charge you another 50% on top of that for overage fees, all this kind of stuff, like my life is in danger, all this kind of stuff, right? So but I think by that time I have a feeling you guys are going to figure out, like, you guys are going to be looking for the music and everything like that. I'm going to just be fighting with the company, and I'm just like, what, like, you guys are just going to throw me out.
No, it's good stuff. Yeah, the pressure you're putting us on there for 60 minutes, and our life depends upon it. I mean, woo, and a genre we've never done before. I don't know if we're that good. We'll see. Anyways, next up is Daniel. Based on my research so far, I'm detecting 4 basic corporate styles: Americana, orchestral, pop rock, and EDM. That sounds about right to me. There are probably some other ones as well. I think, well, anyways, I'll go on with the question. My question regards EDM. How wide or narrow is that genre? I have some cues that I think are more electronic pop. Is that something you think music libraries might be interested in? You attached a cue, Daniel, but we're not doing reviews right now. This is just for Q&A right here. So maybe Trevor, you can probably offer some insights on that in terms of EDM. How wide or narrow is the genre? And then he's talking about more in terms of like corporate appeal, like what styles could you throw together to have a corporate appeal for a library? And he does a more electronic pop, probably stuff that you'd probably hear on the Billboard chart right now. So is that something you think libraries might be interested in?
So does he mean like corporate type placements is like corporate ads and stuff like that? Or
Yeah,
does
because
he
he's talking
mean
about
like
corporate styles. That's what I
appealing?
think he's talking about.
Oh, yeah, I don't have as much. That's probably my least experienced kind of area is the corporate area. So I
I can
actually
take
don't
it
really have a
first.
good answer for it
Okay.
there.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
go
take it
ahead.
first, and then maybe you can jump in afterwards. So, EDM, in my experience, has been much more of a clean. I want to describe this well. It's kind of hard to describe. It's very clean. It's very pure. It's kind of innocent sounding, but it can be. Actually, no, it is. It's usually clean, pure, and innocent sounding. I usually don't find that like the dirty party style kind of EDM works well with corporate stuff. Kind of chaotic EDM really doesn't do well. Like dubstep, like growling and kind of glitchy stuff. Usually that's not the corporate sound. I find that corporate is much more. It's kind of vanilla flavored in a way. Like they really want it to be very pleasing to the ears, and they usually want it to be kind of uplifting, inspirational, motivational. So, you could basically do a four on the floor kind of a thing where you have some plucks. You can even have it with piano. I usually find if you can do piano, guitar with kind of an EDM structure for the drums, those really work out well. Think like Coldplay or U2 on an EDM beat. That's pretty much where I've gone with my kind of corporate music. Because when you're talking about like ads, infomercials, especially we've done some of those in the syndicate lately where we're talking about like we want to have this like, go from a sad moment to a really triumphant problem solved kind of moment. When we get to that section, like a lot of times, especially when it comes to advertising and corporate sort of needs, they need people to feel good, whatever it is. It's a service, it's a product, it's a whatever coming up. They want people to feel good and associate good feelings with their service or their product. So I found that that's usually where you want to go with. You don't want to go to dark tension, gritty, sort of trance stuff. That doesn't really work so well in the corporate world. So you kind of keep it more in the clean, uplifting, kind of beautiful sounds. That's definitely one way to go. Chill step is another kind of subgenre of EDM that I've found for myself has done very well with car commercials. So if you don't know what chill step is, you probably do know, Daniel, if you follow EDM, but chill step is kind of this more, a little bit more laid back, but a lot of percussion, a lot of kind of interesting kind of, I guess, kind of glitchy sounding percussion, but just beautiful, almost like meditative music on top of it. Just very emotional, beautiful melodies, beautiful chord progressions, a lot of swells, you can do a lot of side chaining with it. But of course, there's still going to be acoustic pianos in there. There can be guitars. So it's just very uplifting, spiritual sounding music. And I find that also does really well with corporate stuff. I don't know if Mike, if you have some more, you can add to that.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you're talking about like especially like corporate industrials and corporate ads and stuff like that, in my experience I've seen so how wide or narrow, it really just depends on the brand, and it depends on the I guess on the product too, but mostly on the brand and what kind of brand it is that you're kind of working for. So I agree with Jesse that a lot of like the stuff that's really in your face doesn't work. So, but at the same time, genre-wise, the genres can be pretty wide, So, for instance, like drum and bass, if it's in your face, it's not going to work. But at the same time, some of the more atmospheric and chiller stuff has worked. And then you have like sort of weird ones too, where it's like I think like some of the key words is just like kind of for corporate to me has been like cool and slick. It just has to be like just I don't know how to describe it, but it's just like just really polished, and then as far as genre and style, a lot of times what can happen is like brands will also look to other brands for ideas. So a big one is like you watch like the keynotes of like the Apple keynotes, right? They're known for just whatever their intro song is at the WWDC or whatever it is, right? For the next year and a half, you're just, I know for me, like I'm just getting briefs. It's like, oh, I heard this new tune. I don't even know where I heard it from. And it's like, and it's always that song that Apple used, and because Apple's advertising is just so on point that everybody wants to, kind of be like Apple. But, and that's for like brands that want to be like sort of cool, but not all brands are going to want that. So I think slick and polished is kind of like what you want to think of when kind of writing music for corporate uses.
Yep. There you go. I love it. All right. And here's the last question for today, guys. By the way, I know I probably should remind you in the chat, we are only taking questions that were posted onto that post that I put up in the platform a couple days ago. We're not doing live chat, live Q&A chat today in terms of the chat box. We're only doing the ones that you guys posted here. And I have to say, I like this format a lot better already. I feel much more relaxed. I don't feel like I'm managing all these different things. So I think we'll stick with this format for a little while. And who knows, we'll try some other things out as well. But right now, I feel much more present. I feel like the last time I couldn't even listen to these guys' answers because I was always worried about, okay, what's going on in the chat? And I don't like that. I just don't like to be kind of disconnected from this chat while we're doing it. So, and I knew I have to do a little bit of, maintenance here and there, but this certainly was a lot better. All right, so this is the last one from Daniel. I always wondered why music libraries don't include EP style releases as well as full albums. For example, a 5 or 6 track EP release as opposed to only albums. I'm assuming that this model is solely based on clients always wanting as many options as possible, but I'd love to know your thoughts on this and if you feel that could ever work. Mike, you can maybe start with this one because I know your company does do EP releases, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do. So, we saw that as a strategy, especially like starting out, because of to kind of cover all the different types of requests that we get from clients. So our strategy was to like, okay, well, let's do less tracks, 5, 6 EPs in a wider range of styles. So we still do that, just because, you do need to send options, but, and this is more just towards the clients that we work with. And, we've kind of established that we have a certain brand, we have a certain thing that people come to us for. And through that, we've also established like, hey, I'm not going to throw like 20 tracks at you for you, not just to like sift through, but like if you tell me like what it is that you're looking for, I'm going to take it upon myself, or me and my partner, we're going to take it upon ourselves to like heavily curate and send you the things that we feel like is just going to really hit on the nail. So usually those searches, those submissions from our end tend to only be anywhere between 4 to 8 tracks tops, and 8 is like kind of rare for us, so that said, we don't always have a need for like 12 or 14 track albums all the time. However, I think it's also because of the nature of our work, since we do mostly advertising, we're mostly placing one song at a time anyway, so now that we've started to get a little bit more into background music for TV, we're starting to do more albums because they're starting to ask for more music. So I think it is dependent on the clients, and it's dependent on how you kind of work.
Totally. Trevor, you have anything you can add to that?
Yeah, I've actually noticed this a bunch too, which wasn't a thing when I started, but now it's really kind of growing as a practice. And I think, to Mike's point, certain types of clients and certain types of music, they just don't want a bunch of it, right? Like it'd be weird to do an EP of like hip hop beats or EDM tracks, just straight up. The clients who usually want those just want a whole bunch of them to then put in their reality or their sports. But if you have an EP of like some vocal stuff, or maybe some kind of niche like trailer, or some form of a more niche kind of album, but it's maybe 7 tracks instead of 12 or whatever. I've seen a lot of that lately, especially with vocal stuff, which is understandable with the vocal stuff too, because there's it's also a way for libraries to also just put that stuff out. Like I've done it. We did an album recently that I think was 8 songs, and it was like, do I sit and wait for 3, 4 more, or do I just go ahead and put it out as an EP? And it makes sense in the like just keeping things going kind of thing, as well as clients aren't. I remember somebody telling me a long time ago, when it was either Warner or Mega or one of the big libraries, they noticed that just the last like 10 or last like 4 or 5 tracks on any album that had like vocals, or a trailer album, or any kind of like somebody's only really going to need one anyway album, they didn't listen to the last couple of tracks. Those tracks had like a tiny play count. But then like albums like just straight hip hop beats, 12 tracks, like they had full track counts because a sports network is just grabbing all 12 and using them like crazy. So it makes sense in a way, and especially if you think about those last tracks, like let's say you have 12 albums or 12 tracks in an album and it's all vocal songs. Maybe you do 6 now, release it as an EP, and they'll listen to all 6. And then a little bit later, take those other 6 and do another EP and get those listen, because it's better that way if you have all those listens and potential placements of the first 6, and then those other 6 like just go off into the ether or spread it out. And so I think the EP thing to button this all up, I think is actually a really cool new thing that libraries are doing for certain kinds of music.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's a really good point. Yeah, because I do know that there's definitely many. I think there's a correlation to that too. Maybe not, but I feel like there is. That like I know some of the tracks that I've even had my my music placed on instrumental, that if they were at the top of, like, let's say they were between like number 1 and number 5 on that album, I feel like, I haven't done this research, but I feel like I've gotten more placements from those as opposed to the ones like if it was like a 20 track album, which I've had my tracks on, and my tracks like number 18. I don't find as many placements with those. That could be a coincidence, that could be whatever, but it makes sense to me just on a gut level that like usually it's the top of the list people usually listen to. And if it's a matter of like they're looking for that one track, by the time they get to number 18, they probably have already found it, hopefully, right? And so that might be how people are going through these things, going from the top to the bottom. But it also could be people are just looking for an interesting title. They're just looking for the waveform. The waveform looks like something that they might be looking for, right? So there's all these different ways that people can be auditioning these things. But certainly those are all really good, all good, considerations that I never actually even thought about. And the reason why I've always told you guys in terms of why put together a full album, a 10 to 12 track album, is because it's kind of one of those undeniable things. Like you're not even coming, like if it's a library that says, well, you're going to put together, when we put together our releases for our clients, we want to make sure that we have 12 tracks for them or 10 tracks. If that's their like standard. Again, if their standard is like 6, like they're doing EP stuff, and you come with 10, you're still within their range, right? You're still going to be within their acceptable limit of what they're looking for. You might not get 4 of them accepted, or maybe they'll say, hey, we're taking them all and we're going to put 6 out right now, but we're going to hold on to these other 4 and put those out with the next bunch. So put together 2 more for us so we can put that in part 2 to this volume, right? But if you come to them with only 4 tracks or 6 tracks and they require 10 tracks or 12 tracks for an album, it's not that you guaranteed won't be accepted, but it's like when you come to them and say, I have a full album ready to go, it's already themed, it's already in one genre, and I've already done the research, I already know that you guys do this stuff, I know that your clients look for this stuff, you're giving them kind of this undeniable offer where it's like, wow, you're giving them almost no reason to say no. That's what you're doing. You're taking all the no's off the table and them going, if we just say yes to this producer, get them under contract, and we've got a whole new album that we can start shopping out tomorrow. And it's what we need. This producer actually did the research. They know this is what we're actually going to be pitching to our clients. So we're going to be making money. The producer's going to be making money. Our clients are going to be happy. So they'll keep coming back to us. So you're taking all the no's off the table by having this approach. That's why I say don't come to them with 3 tracks and go, hey, you want to work with me for the next couple of months until I get this up to 12? You're giving them a lot of reasons to say no, because that means they're going to have to hold your hand through the process. They're going to have to coach you through it, give you a lot of feedback, all that kind of stuff, right? Now, they might have the energy and the effort to do that, and God bless them if they do, but most libraries probably won't, because they have other things they need to be worried about, and they just need to work with producers that can bring them licensable stuff from day one. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, for tuning in, and of course, for those of you that posted your questions. Next time we do this, and I'll put up another one when we do this, we'll probably do these usually towards the beginning of the month. Make sure you do list your question. I know some of you put some questions in the chat box, we can't get to them today. So make sure you don't skip this next time. Do put your question on that post when I post it, and we will make sure we get to it from top to bottom. And this time we got through every single question. So I like that too. I know that we last time had to get through almost maybe only half of what happened with the chat box. And this time, everybody that asked a question got your questions answered. So I like that feeling too. It feels more complete than last time. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much. Thank you, Mike and Trevor, for being with us. And I hope everybody has a great day.